That was my first joke, but I had a great childhood.
What was it about writing that got the bug in you? Meeting Steve Hardison was amazing for you. What is your current philosophy of life, if you had to put it in a sentence? What would you say to people that are really struggling right now with with currently the lockdowns, the COVID, all that stuff that's happening?
I don't care if it rains or freezes, long as I got my plastic Jesus.
So what would you like your children and grandchildren to remember about you? Hey, welcome everyone to Reinvention Unlimited podcast. This is where we have conversations with extraordinary people who have literally reinvented themselves, their lives, and even their companies. Here we talk about what led up to that, what it took to reinvent themselves, and where they are now, and where they're going in the future. So I'm George Watson. I'm a 17-year leadership coach, husband, dad, friend. I'm a marathoner. I can say that now because as of October 25th, I became a marathoner. And I'm also a student of humanity. So I started this podcast because I have a very large appetite for learning. I sincerely love people, and I'm just amazed by what human beings can accomplish. And I wanted to create a platform where we could experience these people's whole story from beginning to end. So this is my first show. It's long awaited. My guest today is Mr. Steve Chandler. You're all in for a big treat. I first met Steve back in 2004 through email. I read his book. It's called 17 Lies That Are Holding You Back and the Truth That'll Set You Free. And it just really blew me away. This book, actually, I credit this book for my own personal reinvention story. I've never read a book before where at the end, the author invites you to email them. So I did. I emailed him. I told him how his book impacted me. He wrote back. Then I wrote back. Next thing I knew, I was on a plane down to Arizona where I met him in person, and I had him as my coach for 6 months in a program to help coaches create a profitable coaching practice. So it was an amazing experience. Steve has been, I would call him a business productivity coach, and he's also been a corporate leadership trainer. His clients include Microchip Technologies, Honeywell, University of Arizona, where he lives, Suncor, Arizona Media Credit Union, Arizona Media Credit Union, Banner Health. He's worked with Motorola, Merrill Lynch, Wells Fargo Bank, Texas Instruments, and all in all, about 50 Fortune 500 companies worldwide. Steve's first audiobook, which was called 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself, was named Chicago Tribune's Audiobook of the Year in 1997. King Feature Syndicate repeated the honor by naming Chandler's 35 Ways to Create Great Relationships in Business and in Life in the 1999 Audiobook of the Year. Try and say that 5 times. Chandler graduated from the University of Arizona in creative writing and political science, and he spent 4 years in the U.S. Army in psychological warfare. He uses advanced communication processes to train sales teams and other teams focused on increasing revenue and productivity. For the past 13 years, Steve has run the coaching school or Coaching Prosperity School. It's also known as the ACS for Advanced Client Systems, attended by hundreds of coaches from around the world. You can find him online at stevechandler.com. He's co-author with Rich Litvin of the best-selling The Prosperous Coach, and has written dozens of other books, now in over 20 languages, including Time Warrior, Reinventing Yourself, Shift Your Mind, Shift Your World. On Amazon, I found over 40 books authored by Steve. 13 of those were self-authored and 30 of them were co-authored. So Steve collaborates with a lot of people. You could say, I'm a fan. welcome, Steve. Welcome to
Hi,
Reinvention
George.
Unlimited. It's good to see you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. So I gave everyone an intro of you, and the expectations are really high, so you better not disappoint.
Okay, I'll do what I can.
So let's start at the beginning of your life, Steve. An amazing life. You have this, I counted over 40 books on Amazon, 13 self-authored, and then another 30 or so co-authored. So amazing work. But I want to, today is about your story. And I really want to honor, where you began, what it took to get to where you are now, and then what the future holds. So let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Mississippi in a little town called Gulfport.
How big, little town, how big is that? How big is
Oh, I
the,
really don't know because I think I left before I was one.
oh, is
So
that right?
yeah, I haven't looked into it. It's not too far from Tupelo, where Elvis was born.
Oh, wow. And you're an Elvis fan. I know that.
Yeah, very much
So,
so.
so where did you actually grow up then? You were born there and you moved?
Well, I started out, I spent a little time in California, went to New Jersey until I was about 5, then
Wow.
came to Birmingham, Michigan, which is where I live right now. And I lived in Birmingham through high school in Michigan. And then I went
Wow.
to the University of Arizona and lived there for about 50 years before I came back here to Michigan. And then there were times in between when uh, I was in the Army for 4 years, and then I lived in Germany there. But mainly, it's mainly been Arizona and Michigan.
Okay. What's your first vivid memory of your family growing up?
I think it was in New Jersey. My father was pushing me along in a little cart, and this is something that I think I remember. He told me about it, so I don't know if I remember or I just remember the story, but there was a dead robin by the side of the road, by the side of the sidewalk, and I said, that's a bird, why isn't it flying? And he said, well, it's dead. And I said, okay. And we went along, and then there was an squashed orange that had dropped, and I said, look, Dad, a dead orange. And he thought that was funny. So that was my first joke, and it was okay for that age, if
Yeah.
you're,
What was your
3.
father like? I mean, you would go for walks with him there? What
Well,
was that like?
he was in the military when I was born.
Oh, wow.
He was overseas in the World War II, and he came back home, I think, when I was around 3. And he was a hard driving, success driven corporate America leader, manager. And he grew up in a really poor town in Arizona. They had a real tough go of it. Their father left, their bunch of kids, and the mother worked day and night. And so
Wow.
he grew up in a real poor area of Arizona. And so he was driven to succeed, and he made a great success of himself. So he was a real sports star and hard driven guy, hard drinking guy.
Really? Okay.
Uh, so I grew up in a home actually with two alcoholic parents.
Oh, your mother
Uh,
was also an alcoholic?
yeah, pills and alcohol. And so I grew up there, but I had a great childhood. I had a really wonderful memory of growing up. I had friends, real close friends. And so what I lost or missed in family, I got with my friendships. We had a real close neighborhood, and we all hung together and had a very happy time with sports and music and friendship. So I had a happy childhood.
I never, it sounds like old time America. We hear stories about that. Is that pretty much what it was like for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, it
Yeah.
was. It's like old time America. The father gone all the time, succeeding and flying around the country. The mother home, kind of depressed and lost in suburban America, drinking
Well,
and taking pills and being a little distant.
did you ever have any times with your mother where, rather than her covering this up, where there was times of clarity, wonderful moments with your mom? Were you close to her at all, or?
When I was younger, yeah,
Yeah.
before the alcohol and prescriptions really took uh, were central to her life. When I was younger, yeah, I had really nice relationship with her and my father. When he was home, he took me to ball games. He played baseball with me in the backyard, and so yeah, it was.
That sounds
I didn't think I was missing anything. I didn't have anything to compare it to, and most of the people in that area had the same kind of thing: father driven, mother staying at home.
right.
Just thought that was normal.
What was the rest of your family like? Do you have any brothers, sisters,
Yeah,
aunts, uncles?
um, I have two sisters and one brother. I was the oldest, and
Okay.
they came after me, and we were never too close because my sister was born 4 years after me, so we always had four
Yeah.
years apart, and she had her girlfriends, and then my brother was born 4 years after that, and then 4 years after that, my little sister was born. So by the time she was born, I was pretty old. But we were warm and friendly with each other, but we didn't spend a lot of time. All Each of us had our own little networks of friends.
Oh, wow. Did you ever do any family things together? Or what was that like?
No, no, we did not.
No.
And I heard about those later, like family vacations and things like that. But we didn't miss it. We didn't
Yeah.
think, oh, why aren't we going? We were having our own lives. We had an amazing neighborhood. The people interacted. It was a real close little neighborhood with lots of trees, and we were outside all day playing with each other. And the other parents would look after us if our parents weren't there, and so it was
Yeah.
a happy upbringing.
That's amazing. I had the same type of upbringing, a small town up in Canada as well. And when the lights go down and start dimming, it's time to go home.
Yeah,
Like the whole
yeah, that's
neighborhood
what it
kind
was.
of they would parent you, right? Like if you did
Yeah,
something, if the neighbors saw you doing something, they'd come out and read you the
yeah,
riot act. Yeah.
yeah.
And that was expected back then.
Yes.
So where did you go to school? Like what was school like for you? I know you went to school, but what was school like for you?
Uh, I went to junior high school and high school in Birmingham. I enjoyed it.
Were you a good
Uh,
student?
no, no, I was never a good student.
Give me
I
an
just,
example of that.
I did the minimum to get by. I,
Okay.
yeah, that was it. That was my goal. How little can you do and advance to the next grade? That was the
Yeah.
game. Because when I got home, I didn't want to do homework. I wanted to read. I read all the time, and I was involved in sports, and I played sports, and that was my central interest. And then I had to figure out, what do I absolutely have to do to go from grade 9 to grade 10, not embarrass myself by being set back. High school was a lot of fun. I was in journalism in high school and started to really love writing, and that uh,
What was it
but
about writing that got the bug in you?
I
Remember?
think really I wasn't good, which doesn't surprise people today. It's not a shock. I wasn't good at expressing myself personally one on one. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
even my first audio book I ever made, it was kind of a disaster. It wasn't I don't read out loud very well, and the first reviews were super negative. Back in the day when they reviewed things in newspapers,
Mm.
There was a newspaper in Buffalo when my first audiobook came out, and the title of the review was "Wake Me When It's Over," and the reviewer said, "This guy somehow has written a book about 100 ways to motivate yourself, but he has forgotten to motivate himself before going into the recording studio. So please do not operate any heavy machinery while listening, and
Said
do
that?
not drive. Yeah, do not drive while listening to this." Anyway, so
That's awesome. Did you keep a copy of that somewhere? That'd be
it's
great.
somewhere. Yeah, it's somewhere. And that was kind of discouraging, but so I wasn't that great at that kind of thing, but I would always write instead. So even when I was a little boy, if we visited my grandparents, I would leave them notes and put them under their pillows before I left, thanking them for having us there and writing. And so I always wrote. I wrote tons of letters to people, and I had friends, like I had a little friend who moved away. We would write letters to each other back and forth,
Wow.
two or three times a week, just from the joy of writing. So writing was kind of a way for me to express what I wanted to express in a way that I felt good doing, and after doing so much of it,
Yeah.
it
How old were
started.
you when this was a realization for you, the writing piece? Would you say?
It was in my high school days, and so
Okay.
I was in journalism, and then when I went to college at Arizona, I majored in creative writing, and later worked for a couple newspapers. So I was on a newspaper, and you had to write all day long. You couldn't have writer's block or procrastinate because they need the article by a certain time.
Wow. Good training for you.
Yeah, it was. And it really teaches you uh, that you don't have to, you can write. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to put off writing because you're blocked. I only heard about that later. And fortunately,
Yeah.
writing to deadlines in journalism, that's never a consideration.
What kind of authors did you like? You said you used to get home and you didn't like to do homework, but you like to read books. What kind of authors? What were you reading back then
I was
in high
reading
school?
adventure stories, history, adventure. I was reading sports books. They had a lot of at the library. They had a lot of sports fiction for young people, were stories of football games. I read about the Knights of the Round Table. They were a real fascination for me,
Yeah.
and those kind of things I was reading all the time.
So journalism in high school, I guess that would be English. We call it English here in Canada. I don't know what you would, is there
Well,
a
we had English
class?
too. We had
Okay.
English too, yeah. And but journalism was about putting the high school newspaper out every week, and so that was the journalism. And then English
Okay.
class, I never really liked English class because
Too
there wasn't a
technical.
lot of writing involved. It was just reading and taking tests.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite subject that was connected to that in some way?
I think
Do you remember?
journalism was it. It was really
Yeah,
fun.
just doing this.
Uh,
That was a school newspaper. Was that right?
yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. All
But
the other subjects, no.
what would you hate the most out of all those
Uh,
subjects in school?
I I didn't like math. I didn't like English. Now, when I was in college, I learned to love English because the books were great.
Yeah.
And but in high school, it was just not fun. Latin, I didn't like Latin. We had to take. It was a requirement in our school that we take a few years of Latin.
Wow. Have things have
That
ever
was not
changed?
fun. You can't find a lot of people to speak Latin to. I found out in the hood.
Yeah. No. Okay. Can you think of like who are anyone really impact you, mentors, things like that, and through those formative years of writing?
No,
No.
Not really. I really my friends, I hung out with friends. I had some friends who were a little older I looked up to, and they were sort of, but I didn't really have anything that you would call a mentor in high school or college. That came later when my life fell apart, and I was in dire need of some guidance. But in those days, I wasn't looking for a mentor.
So you graduate high school. What was that like, by the way? You
Well,
graduate.
I
You did
didn't
it.
do.
You did the
Yeah, I
minimum,
did it.
right?
I did it. It was a miracle that I was able to walk in graduation. But I found that because of my low grades, I couldn't get into the school all my friends were going to in Michigan, the University of Michigan.
Wow, what was that like?
Because they had high academic standards. My grades were very low. And so they were all going there. And I didn't want to go to some other school in Michigan. It was a social embarrassment for me. So
Right.
I I went to the University of Arizona, and I thought it'd be fun and exciting to get all the way out of Michigan to Arizona, and so that's where I went.
And you've been ever since.
Yeah, I loved it there. I stayed there after college, went to the Army, and then came back to Arizona and had my kids there, and I loved it. I still love Arizona.
Yeah.
Uh,
I,
my children all live there still.
yeah, I was there when I was 12, and the second time I was there was taking the coaching prosperity school, and I just was shocked when I came outside. It was great in the airport, and I came outside and was like I walked into an oven. That
Yeah,
was amazing. That was
yeah, it
shocking
is
when
very
you're not
hot.
used to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So you went to study creative writing. That makes sense because that was something that you really loved in high school. But you also studied political science. Why political?
Yes,
Why did you choose
yeah.
political
I
science?
was really interested in politics back then and international relations. That was interesting to me. So that was my minor, and my major was creative writing.
Why was that so interesting to you? That
I just the way people negotiate with each other and
oh
give great speeches. I was a huge fan of John Kennedy, and so I was real fascinated with politics and political science back then.
wow, you're a fan of John Kennedy. What was it like when he got assassinated?
That was
For
heartbreaking.
you, what was it like
Yeah,
for you?
yeah, it was
Do,
heartbreaking. I was in Mexico at the time.
yeah,
I had been kicked out of college, and so they suspended me for a year and said I could come back in a year and they'd give it one more try. And if I failed again academically, I was gone for good.
yeah.
So my father said, "Why don't you go to Mexico and learn Spanish during your off year?" So I went down to Mexico, and I was there learning Spanish when John Kennedy was killed,
Do you,
and
what
it was
do you
horrible.
remember what you were doing? You watching TV or when did you hear about it? Just curious. I'm
Uh,
always fascinated when people recall these moments.
I was living in a boarding house, and I had a roommate, and he was kind of a nasty guy who didn't like Americans. And he came in one night and he said, "Your president has just been shot." He was It was like in my face, and I said, "Nah, you
Yeah,
must have misread something." And then I went out and got a Spanish newspaper, and he was right. It was devastating at the time.
yeah. They say that one thing really changed the whole background mood in America.
Yeah, it
People,
did.
yeah. So, did that have anything to do with you going in the army, or why did you end up going
No,
in the army?
I had been at the University of Arizona for 2 or 3 years,
Yeah.
and I was kind of directionless. I had no desire to leave college and get a job. There was nothing I really wanted to do. I had no real goals. And but if you during those days, if you left college, you would be drafted into
Okay.
the army and probably sent to Vietnam. So I decided to enlist, and they had a program where if you enlisted for 4 years, the first year they would teach you a foreign language, and then you would, using that language, you would be some kind of electronic spy somewhere in the world, a
Huh.
translator.
Wow.
So I learned Russian at the Presidio of Monterey,
Are you
and
kidding? Wow.
I was sent to Berlin to listen in on the Russians on the other side of the wall, because East Germany was occupied by Russia at
Yeah.
that time, by the Soviet Union. It wasn't called Russia.
Yeah.
But so I joined the army kind of as a, what else am I going to do? They will give me food and lodging for free, and I'll learn a language. And I always liked languages.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, I'll just do that, and that'll postpone adulthood another 4 years. That's a pretty good deal.
how how hard was it to learn Russian?
At the beginning, it was very hard because the alphabet is completely different than
Yeah.
ours. They have a Cyrillic alphabet, so the letters are all different. Uh, but as it went along, it got easier and easier. It's a very logical language. It's not like English, where every word is has different. All the pronunciations are different. Russian is very logical. Once you get the hang of it, the grammar comes easy, and it was really a lot of fun learning Russian.
Can
It
you
was good.
can you tell us anything, any stories from that time, or is it all classified? You can't talk about it.
Well, it's not classified anymore. When I was over in
Ah,
Berlin, we would listen to things. We listened in on phone calls uh, being made by the Russian military, and then we would transcribe what we heard, and we would send it back to Washington, and that allowed them to keep an eye on what the Russians were doing, including we knew over there in Germany about the Soviet Union's invasion of Czechoslovakia a couple of weeks before it happened. So we
wow.
knew about it just from what we were hearing. Um, so it was really interesting over there. Those were days, George, though, when I was really drinking a lot.
Talk about
So
that a little bit. How did that
yeah,
start?
so well, my father was a great drinker, and back in the days when he drank, it wasn't called. People didn't call it alcoholism unless someone was really, really in bad shape. But we called it just the macho ability to drink well. A good drinker,
Yeah,
you can drink another guy under the table, and that was badge of
like a
pride.
competition. It was a
Yeah,
competition. Who's more manly?
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And so in the army, there was a lot of that. When you got off duty, you'd go in. Berlin was a real party town with lots of bars, and they stayed up all night. And so it was wild times when I was over there.
So it must be tough to even remember anything that happened if
Well, I
that's
can
how
remember
you were.
you had to, in order to translate Russian and type it out, you couldn't be too hungover. You had to manage your drinking in such a way that you still had your job, because if it was a dicey game.
So that must have been tough, given that you love the drinking and I would think the escape that it provided for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I learned it in my senior year of high school,
Yeah.
and just drank a lot through college, and parties all the time, and all my friends were drinking all the time. So it really became a horrible addiction that I didn't really see was an addiction. I didn't see it that way. I saw myself as a really good drinker. I can really drink better than my friends, and the people I admired were drunks, like Dylan Thomas.
Yeah.
and Norman Mailer, and they were all talking about writing and drinking goes together. Great writers are great drinkers, and so I glorified it and made it like part of the wild and crazy lifestyle.
Oh,
And
wow.
it didn't really hit me that it was a horrible addiction, even though I was making a total mess of my life. I just thought that's because I'm a wild and crazy guy with a free spirit who doesn't conform to all this
Right.
boring.
There was no
So,
connection in your mind that this was having any negative
nah,
impact whatsoever. Okay.
no, no, and
So what,
no,
so up to this time, what was did you meet a girl? What was your love life like up till now?
yeah, I had lots. I had girlfriends, and
Yeah.
I and I was drinking a lot, and I got after college. I got a job at the daily newspaper in Tucson as a sports writer, and
Was this
that
after
was,
the army? Was this after the
yeah,
army or before?
after
Yeah.
the army, and I really enjoyed it. It was really fun to write sports columns and articles all day long and drink all night long, and but it threatened my job, and I finally I would come in so hungover that I finally had to leave that job. I was no longer functional as a writer, and that's when I knew this might be a problem. And
Can you tell us about an incident that actually triggered that
yeah,
you can
I'll tell you
remember?
what did it.
Yeah.
I had a guy I admired who was a writer, and he was worked at ad agencies. He was the father of a friend of mine, and he and I would write letters back and forth about books we liked, and he was a really wonderful writer.
Yeah.
But he had gone into AA, and he'd been sober about 5 or 6 years, and I wrote him a letter about how I won this drinking contest with a guy, and he wrote me a letter and said, You may not like me after this. In fact, you may never write to me again, but I want to tell you something that I just have to tell you. You're not a you're not like a crazy creative guy who has to drink. You're not a wild and free spirit. You are a drunk. You are an alcoholic.
Wow.
And unless you get help for it, you're not only going to ruin your life, but there's a good chance you're going to lose your life at a very young age. And it was hard for me to go to a meeting and get help. And it'll be hard for you, but you have to face the truth. And I care about you. And I remember reading that letter and thinking, what if he's right? And I just kept walking around reading the letter again, and it just hit me. He is right.
Huh.
And so I called a guy I knew who went to AA meetings, and I said, I might, no, I'm not sure, but I might have a little problem with drinking. And he said, well, come to a meeting with me. Nothing to lose. And so he took me to an 12-step meeting, and it just hit me. Yeah, this is it. But that was the greatest. That became the greatest thing in my life. I wrote a book about it called Death Wish,
Yeah.
and that turned my whole life around. That really
Wow.
woke me up. It had my brain get clear for the first time since high school, and I began going to meetings and reading books about recovery, spirituality, addiction, and then I saw I saw then that people can change, and people can get on a spiritual path, whether it's religious or not,
Right.
and that spiritual path will do more for them And I saw it all around me in these meetings. Uh, that will do more for them than anything else they can find on earth. And so that changed my life completely. And so my first real mentor was my sponsor in the 12 step program. He was an older guy, concert pianist, really bright.
Wow.
And he would sit with me for hours. And I kept, I kept fighting against the 12 steps, fighting against the
Right.
spiritual program. And he would sit and laugh and he'd say, he would just be patient and listen to me and talk to me. And it was amazing. So that I owe my whole life to that and
So
to
you didn't
that
take
experience.
yourself out. You kept doing. What did it take for you to keep putting yourself in that transformational
Uh,
space?
After the first few months of just being lost without drinking, because
Yeah.
I couldn't socialize without drinking. I couldn't play. I loved playing guitar and singing. I couldn't do that without drinking. My hands were shaky. I was too nervous. I was a nervous wreck.
Amazing.
After that wore off, physically and neurologically, life just kept getting better and better. And then going to the meetings 2 or 3 times a week had me connect with other people and really showed me real life in a way I never really saw growing up or in college or high school. Just real life, real people who had horrible pasts, who had the courage to ask for help, and who had rebuilt their lives. And it was hugely inspiring for me and turned my life around.
So it was what I'm hearing is it was the community really. Without that community, being connected to a community of people that were rooting for you and really being a stand for you to be more than
Yeah,
you are. Yeah.
yes, that's it. Yeah. And then learning through the recovery program, learning what it does to the body to hold on to a resentment. They have a
Mm,
really big portion of the recovery is dealing with your resentments and thoughts about other people and how they, if you don't let those go, you're gonna drink again because
wow.
they mess with your mind, they mess with your heart. It's hard to connect with anybody when you have that in you.
Yeah.
And so that was a big breakthrough.
You ever read Brad Blanton's book, Radical Honesty?
Yeah, I read it long ago. Yeah, I really
Yeah.
liked
There's a piece in there he talks about resentment where they had this husband and wife, and he gets his clients. He's a psychologist, and he gets his clients to tell the truth to each other. And she was in a wheelchair, and he was looking after her. I'll never forget this because when you were talking, is kind of highlighted for me. And this is where I learned about resentments. Was reading this book really solidified it. Where he said, "I resent having to look after you," which seems counterintuitive to say that to someone you love, but she knew he resented, and it just this tension between them just broke, and they
it.
healed the relationship. It's amazing when you talk about resentment how uh, it's almost right there with unforgiveness. I'm going to
Yeah,
drink this poison, and you're going to die, kind of thing.
yeah, that's right. That's it.
So, what was the impact of this time? Were you married at this time at all? I know you
No,
had kids, and okay,
I
what?
didn't have kids. I wasn't married. Uh, and so after I got sober, I got married. Um, and proceeded to have 4 children.
Wow,
One of whom I adopted right away. It was the 2-year-old daughter of the woman I married. So I adopted her and then had 3 more children
wow.
and really took on life in a way where I had children, I had a job, I had a little house. It's just it was a
What
different life.
What were you doing at this time for a job, for work at this time?
I was working in advertising. I was writing advertising copy,
Okay.
uh, creative director at a little tiny advertising agency. And I did that. And then I did some journalism. I went to another newspaper. And then I wrote songs for 5 years. I
Huh.
joined forces with my best friend, and he and I wrote songs for 5 years and lived off of that. We got a number of them recorded, enough to live off of
Any we
barely.
know? Any we would know?
No, uh, two reasons. It was way back then,
Yeah.
and most of our songs got recorded by country artists. And unless you're a country fan,
Hmm.
you wouldn't know it. Mickey Gilley recorded one of them. He was in the movie, some John Travolta movie where they ride a mechanical bull. I forget what it was called, but that song was in that movie.
Nice.
And yeah, so we got a lot of them recorded with country artists, Don Williams and people like that. But
Well, what?
enough to live on.
How was it for you to become a father, having gone through this? And were you like your? And also, were you like your father growing up, or different?
No, no, I didn't want to be like that. I mean, that was my first goal as a father. Was I didn't want to be an absentee father.
Yeah.
So I was real close to the kids, spent a lot of time with them, really enjoyed it, really enjoyed parenting. And my wife, after a couple of years after we'd had all the kids, she had a mental disorder, a brain disorder. So she was institutionalized, and I got full custody of all four kids when they were little.
Wow.
So I ended up being a single father with full custody of four children for 9 or 10 years while they were growing up. So that added a little adventure to the mix. Uh,
Yeah. Well, we had kind of the same situation in my life. Only my mother's had mental challenges. She was actually institutionalized. My father got custody of us, and so I'm the youngest of three. I have a sister and a brother, older than me. But it was amazing having a single dad. What was like? Do you have any stories from that time that you can remember or share
oh
with us
yeah, I
about?
mean, yes, it was wild. There was one time my daughter came back from a counseling session at school where all the kids get the children of single parents got counseling at this school just to see if they were okay.
Wow.
So they were checking in with her, and they were saying, "What is it like living there just with your dad and three other kids?" And she said, "Oh, it's great. It's fun. It's like living in a Bill Murray movie." And this did not go down well with the counselor. My daughter thought, that's the best picture you could give anybody, because we used to watch Bill Murray movies, especially Meatballs. That was our
It
favorite
just
movie.
doesn't matter.
It just doesn't matter. And we love that movie. And anyway, we had a lot of fun over those years. The kids today, they're all grown up. And
Yeah.
to my great surprise, they have happy memories of that time, and I see myself as just running around trying to take care of things. The kids would get in trouble, and I'd go into the schools, and it was wild. They were very independent, creative, and there was a lot of mischief. Although we loved each other, it was a wild time, but they have good memories of it.
You have a Stephanie, don't you?
Yeah.
So do I. I love
Oh,
that name.
nice. Yeah.
So,
Yes. She's great.
so how old are they now? Your kids? They're
They're in their 30s and one is
Yeah.
approaching 40.
Any of them take up writing like their dad?
No, none of them so far. Stephanie is a CFO accountant for a company in Arizona.
Yeah.
Bobby, the youngest, is a singer. He sings in two different venues in Phoenix, and
Wow.
he waits tables. And Margie has a child of her own that she's raising, and Jessica is a recovery coach. She went through addiction and then became a recovery coach for other people in a center. So none of them write
Yeah.
like I did. It's
So
okay with me.
yeah, they, they got their own path.
Yeah.
That's great. Absolutely. I was just curious about when you wrote 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself. How did that come about?
Well, I never intended to write it. There was my Stephanie was going to go to summer camp, and my kids went to summer camp in Michigan, and they loved it there every year. And she wanted to make a little money prior to summer camp, and I didn't know. I gave her a kind of make work job, and I had been teaching a course in doing seminars in motivation and goals. And I had this little handout called 25 Ways to Motivate Yourself. And people who took the course loved this handout. And they said, "Can we make copies for our friends?" And I said, "Sure." And then I thought, well, maybe someday that could be a book, but probably not, because I'm 48 years old, and there's no way publishing company is
Sorry, I
going
have to interject here. Have you written anything up to this point? This was your first book,
to
wasn't it?
first
Yeah.
book. Yeah.
You were 48. Wow.
Yeah. And so I ran off about 60 copies of this little handout. And I said, I gave Stephanie a job, put her at her desk, and I gave her a book of publishers. And I said, so I want you to write a cover letter to each publisher and send this 25 ways and say that I'm an author, and I'm in the process of writing a book called 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself. And this is a sample of what it will be. These first 25 ways gives you an idea of what the book's going to be.
You had 75
And
more you had to come up with.
that's right. So she sent them off. She put them all in envelopes. She made addresses for all these publishers around the country. And then she went off to camp. And it took her hours to do this, days.
Wow.
So I put these envelopes in the back of my car. And I was driving around, and I thought, I'm not going to mail these, because the chances, I mean, they already say they don't take unsolicited manuscripts at these publishing houses. And this is such a long shot, and this is a lot of postage. And finally, I thought, no, I've got to do it. She put so much work into it. The idea that I would just throw them in a dumpster, I couldn't live with myself. So I mailed them off. I had really no expectation anything would happen. After a few weeks, I started getting calls. One publisher called and said, "We would like to publish your book." And I thought it was my friend Fred joking with me, because he used to do all kinds of accents and pranks. And I said, "Come on, Fred. I know who you are." And the publishing person said, "Excuse me, I don't know what you're talking about." And so I said, "Is this real?" And he said, "Yeah, it's real. We are Career Press in New Jersey." And I got a call from one really large publisher, and a few. Finally, I got seven calls from publishers, and I was just overwhelmed. And I
Wow.
had to choose one. So I called Stephanie at camp, and she came to the phone, and I said, "Stephanie, you'll never believe this. Remember those envelopes you sent out?" And she said, "Yeah, yeah." Uh, I've got 7 calls back of people who want to publish the book. And there was a pause, and she said, "Only 7?" And I said, well, oh, okay, yeah, but seven's a lot, Stephanie. It only takes one. And she said, okay, Dad, thanks. I gotta go. And she was just ran back off to camp. And so, but now, like you said, George, how do I do the other 75?
Yeah,
Because as far as I know, there are only 25 ways to motivate yourself.
that's it.
And so I had to come up, I had to look in my life. What motivates me? What motivates others? How have I been motivated? And so I sat for the next 2 months just making myself crazy writing this thing
Wow.
to get it to the publisher on time. And it went there, and the book was launched, and it did really well. It became a bestseller over time. It was slow to go because no one had ever heard of me. And but after a while, it picked up speed, word of mouth, and really sold well. So that showed me didn't matter if I was 48, didn't matter, nothing mattered. If the book is fun to read and helpful, people will buy it. So
Yep.
by that time, I had an idea for my next book, so I was ready. I just kept going.
That's amazing. So what happened that where you got into the something happened there that led you into the seminar business where you
Yeah,
started doing those?
I had been with an ad agency that folded, and so I was going to look for another agency. But by that time, I'd really gotten into self-help books and Wayne Dyer, Napoleon Hill, all these self-help books, and I loved them. And there was a company in Phoenix that did seminars on goal achievement, time management. And so I applied for a job there, and I said, I'd like to be your marketing director because I've done advertising and marketing, and I'll just be your marketing director, and I'll do your advertising and help you guys do your seminars out in the world. And they said, that's great. So they hired me, and I was their marketing director. And I
Wow.
would go to their seminars, and I'd watch the main guy, the main teacher. And I remember thinking, you know what? I think I can explain this better than he is to the audience. But I'm not a public speaker. I have amazing stage fright. I had terrible stage fright.
Yeah.
But I had that thought in my head, and not not long after that, Steve Hardison joined the company, and he had left his corporate job, and he came on as an internal consultant and coach. And I
Mm.
didn't even know what coaching was. Coaching was new then, and he had to explain to us that he'd been through Werner Erhard training,
Yeah.
and coaching was a new thing that Werner was introducing to the world, that you can coach. People can coach average people. You don't have to just coach a sports player or someone in the arts. And so Steve started coaching internally. And when he coached me, I said, I got this funny idea. I might be able to do it, but I have stage fright. And he said, well, let's get you over the stage fright. Let's see what you can do. Because if you've got an idea like that, it doesn't come from nowhere. And we've got to see where it goes. So anyway, I worked so hard to overcome my stage fright. I took acting lessons and did all kinds of things. And I finally filled in for a course that our main guy was teaching. And I taught it, and it worked really well, and I loved it. So they started giving me jobs teaching their courses in
Yeah.
goal achievement, time management. And I got a lot of practice because and I went all over the country teaching these corporations these courses. And so then one day, a major corporation came in, Motorola. They were really big at the time, and I was sitting there with the president and the vice president, and the main guy from Motorola said, do you guys have any course on morale for employees? And the president and vice president said, what do you mean? And they said, the Motorola guy said, we've got some really bad morale, and people are sabotaging the line in manufacturing. And your courses on goal achievement and time management are so good. We thought maybe you had something. And they started shaking their heads. And I said, yeah, actually we do. And the president looked at me, and I had been studying Colin Wilson, who was an obscure British philosopher.
Yeah, I love
But
him.
he was talking about optimism versus being a victim of life,
Yeah.
and that you didn't have to be a mental victim of everything, and you could take an optimistic approach if you choose to, and develop that in yourself. And I've been reading so much and taking notes, and I said, when the Motorola guy left, he said, well, let us see a pilot of it because we really need it. And then I just made up the course real fast. Owner victim.
That's where owner victim came from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's where it came from. And so they came to the pilot and they loved it. And that became our number one course. Owner language, victim language. And the key thing was the ability that you're not stuck with one or the other. That was the most important thing. You're not stuck. Your personality isn't permanent, and how your brain and your mind perceives the world and thinks is not permanent. It's habitual.
Yeah.
And because it's only habitual, you have the creative power to alter it if you want to. And if you're willing to experiment with a more optimistic mindset, you're going to get results in life you weren't getting otherwise. And I knew that for myself. That was my life. So I could teach it from, I used to be total victim. And these are the thinking processes that took me over here.
Yeah.
And that course became really popular. And then my next book was called Reinventing Yourself. And it meant from a victim mindset, like I'm a victim of circumstance, I'm a victim of how people treat me and all that. And converting that to, I want to take ownership of how my life goes.
Yeah.
I want to be a creator and not a reactor. So that book there really, that became the most popular course in this company, and it became the one I took to all these organizations, and really sort of made my career out of that book.
That's amazing. Colin Wilson's fascinating. I remember his experience when he was going to kill himself, and then he realized there were two Colin Wilsons. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
That's an amazing read. I remember reading that, and it just kind of makes the light go on. Your victim owner work has just been very impactful to me, and I know other people I've shared it with. Just they gobble it up. It's one of those things when you experience it, you just can't. You just need more and more because it's so. You can identify with it so easily. I love that book, Reinventing Yourself.
Yeah, thank you.
So that was basically the real meeting. Meeting Steve Hardison was amazing for you.
Yeah,
it was such an off chance encounter, and here he is in the company you're working. What an incredible meeting. Talk a little bit about Steve Hardison. I mean,
he's amazing. He's a force of nature. He's got this amazing energy and optimism and intelligence. And he also has this almost psychic power. When he sits with someone, he really understands what's really behind what they're saying, not just what they're saying. And he sees right through people, but then in a really compassionate way, he calls them out for what he's seeing. I've never with the exception of Byron Katie, I've never seen anyone with the ability to transform another person's life so fast
Yeah.
as the way he does it. If people are open. Now, if they get scared by him, or they get turned off by Byron Katie because it looks too complicated or whatever,
Right.
then the impact isn't there. You have to be a little bit open to work with him. And I was wide open. I was like, man, keep talking.
Yeah. Tell us about it. Can you share with us a coaching experience with Steve, that something that really was a realizing conversation? And
Yeah, there were so many
yeah,
where I would bring, but the main thing that happened in coaching sessions with Steve is that radically changed how I did life and saw life, was he never gave respect to the problem. So if I brought, and I would bring him all kinds of problems that I had with myself, with my habits, with my all my debts I had by that time. It was
yeah,
horrible. But he would listen to the problem, and he would say, okay, that's the situation. That's what we've got, right? And he said, now, given that we've got that situation, what would you like to create? And it was a completely different question. It threw me off. Like, what do you mean? What would I like to create? What does that have to do with me owing the IRS all this money? He said, well, it has everything to do with it. Because that's just the situation. And you're either going to create something that has that become irrelevant and something you no longer think of as a problem, or you're not.
yeah.
And you have infinite creativity in you.
That's such a cool thing.
So what would you like to create? And there was one time I had a huge debt that I had accumulated with the IRS over the years. And I kept hoping some of my accountants would say, oh, they'll forgive that because it's a old debt and it's mostly interest, and you can get things like that forgiven, so don't worry about it, just pay your current taxes. But that wasn't okay, and that kept building, and they finally came. They were going to take our house away, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And I sat with Steve and I said, now this is something that the old what would you like to create is probably not going to apply to. And I told him about it, and he said, okay.
You said that to him? You actually said, this isn't going
Yeah.
to work?
He said, okay, I promise you it will work. If you drop all your negative feelings about this and see it as an adventure, a project, not a problem, you're gonna rise up and we're gonna create something. So we talked for 2 hours, and he said, what's one way you could just put this away? And I said, well, I could get X amount of clients to pay me in advance, X amount of money. He said, okay, that's one way. Let's write that on the whiteboard. That sounds like a ton of, you could do that. You have the capacity. What else? What else? And he said, how about what if just one person you got one person to pay the whole thing? I said, well, I don't know who that is. And he said, I might know somebody. I have a client who said, I've made too much money at my company. I want to find places to put it. I want to invest it. I almost don't care where, but I don't want to pay taxes on it. I want to put it somewhere. And so what if you wrote a proposal to him that would, you create a proposal. Well, what can I offer? To coach him for 200 years? He said, no, you've got all these royalties. You've got all this intellectual property It's just sitting there earning a little royalty here and there. What if you put a package together and sold a piece of that to him for this amount? I said, I guess so. So I put it together. I went to the guy, and the amount was around 400,000 that I owed.
Amazing. Well,
And I put it all together. I sat across the table, talked to him for an hour, and he looked at it, and he had already loved my books. So he was someone Hardison knew, that Hardison gave the books to.
amazing.
And he looked it all over and he said, well, for me to do this, and I thought he was going to say, yeah, it just won't work. And he said, if this is okay with you, I'd have to send you 200 now and 200,000 a week from now. And I said,
What's that like?
let me see, boy. I said, I think that will work for me. Actually, that'll work just fine. It'll work just perfectly. So he shakes my hand. The first check arrived.
Amazing.
And it was just amazing. So it was, and there were so many things like that with Hardison over the years, where I thought I had some amazing problem that I'd never solve.
Yeah.
And he would say, what do you mean you'll never solve? We have 2 hours. What else are we going to do? It's not like we only have 5 minutes, right? And so that got done. I became friends with the guy who invested in that. It became a good investment for him. And my accountant was blown away when he was trying to figure out a way for me to do something to not have my house taken. Maybe you could give him $3,000 a week or something. And I came in and said, I'm ready to pay him off.
Amazing.
And he said, you are? And I said, yeah, I just got a new client. So that was one of 100 stories like that.
So, what is your current philosophy of life, if you had to put it in a sentence, given what you've been through and where you're?
It keeps changing, George. I don't have one that's just like, this is it.
Currently, then.
So currently it's like, I guess it's what I put in the book right now. It's like, everything happens in the moment. Everything happens in the now. And problems occur when I'm lost in the future or in the past. But right now, I'm fine. And if I do want to create something, it's in the now. It gets created in the now. It's not like I'm thinking, oh, how do I write that book? It's going to take a long time. It's just like, how do I start? So my philosophy, if it can be put into words, is slow down, let your ego fall away. Don't be this phony ego you think you are. Be awareness itself. And if you can rest in awareness itself as your identity, then infinite creativity will flow through you. But when you contract into a worried mind and an ego and the monkey mind chattering and identity, then life becomes an overwhelming problem with regrets and discouragements. But if you can rest as awareness and practice that, you'll have a great life.
That's awesome. What would you say to people that are really struggling right now with the with currently the lockdowns, the COVID, all that stuff that's happening? There's a lot of people right now that even are contacting me that are stressed out and depressed and really trying to overcome that. How have you handled it? And what would you say to people? What kind of encouragement would you give them right now?
I think the key thing with the lockdown, with COVID, or anything like people going through a divorce or struggling with anything in life, is to relax enough to see that what you're really struggling with is your thoughts about it.
Mm.
Oh, I don't get to see my best friend. That's so sad. Now, if I'm not lost in that thought, I'm fine.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's a great time to learn how the mind really works instead of just freaking out over situational things. So one of the key things that every client I work with is um, the difference between what's happening and what you think about what's happening. So I usually show them a football field, and now half the fans are cheering for this team, and half the fans are cheering for this team. Now the players will play. That's the event on the field. Now, when the game is over, half the fans are going to be disappointed and upset because their team lost. And the other half are going to be cheering and yelling and waving their pennants and going out to have a drink and laughing. But the event on the field was the same for both people.
Yeah.
So this the people on this part of the stadium are saying we're happy because of what happened on the field. The people over here are saying we're unhappy because of what happened on the field. Now, hang on. How can what happened on the field cause this half of people to be unhappy and that half of people to be happy? If it were really the source of causation of these feelings, we'd all be unhappy or we'd all be happy.
Right.
So that proves that the story I make up about my team winning, and even I make this story up in nanoseconds,
Yeah.
is what causes my feelings.
Mm.
And I used to work with the people at University of Santa Monica. They teach spiritual psychology, and they have a key teaching in spiritual psychology called "I'm upset because." And if your sentence is "I'm upset because," and you put something down there like my wife doesn't know how to cook, my son won't get a job, anything you put in that blank other than my thinking about
Yeah.
is inaccurate.
Yeah.
And when you learn that I'm upset because, and anytime you're pointing outward to finish that sentence,
Yeah.
you don't know how your own mind works.
Huh.
So the COVID experience is um, is a great opportunity to learn more about the power of your own thinking and
Wow.
believing thoughts about what's going on. And so that's what I work with people on.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for that, Steve. Um, so tell me a little bit about you got remarried. You weren't going to get
Yeah,
remarried.
yeah. I mean, the my first wife had, like I said, the mental disorders and everything, and
Yeah. Yeah.
her psychiatrist said she's just not going. She doesn't have the capacity to be a wife and mother.
Wow.
We're trying to work on her being just okay out there in life. So the best thing for her and for your family is for you guys to part. Now you can still be friends with her. You can still, and I still supported her financially over the years, but having her try to be wife and mother in this group, just they said that wasn't going to work, so they sent divorce papers, uh, which I finally signed. I didn't want to do it, but I did.
Yeah.
And anyway, that worked out fine. She's not alive anymore, but she lived for a number of years and had a great relationship with the kids over time. And a couple of years went by, and I met Kathy,
Yeah.
And we were together for 10 years before we got married. And now we just had our 20th anniversary.
Wow.
And that's been great. And the kids love her. And it's been a real blessing.
How did you meet Kathy?
Um, Her brother introduced me to her, took me to a party at her house.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know that it was a matchmaking thing he had in mind. He said, "Well, come on, come to a party. You're working too hard." And we met there, and I really liked her, and I asked her out, and the rest is history.
Rest is history. Wasn't Steve involved in your getting engaged?
Well, yeah, because we
I
were together for 10 years before
That's
getting
right.
married, and I went into a session with him, and he was, like I said, he was kind of psychic. And I said, "Well, here's what I want to work on." He said, "Hang on, how are things with you and Kathy?" Oh,
Just
gee,
out
yeah,
of the blue.
yeah. Well, it's getting frustrated. She lives across town. I've got two more kids living at home. We don't see each other as much as we would really like to.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, what do you want?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What do you want in the long run? Do you want to marry her? Do you want to not marry her? What do you want?" I said, "Well, yeah, I want to marry her." And he said, "When?" "What do you mean, when?" "When?" Uh, I guess ideally maybe a year from now. And okay, let's get our calendar out. Okay, when do you want to ask her?
Love it.
Ask her what? If she'll marry you. I could do that in a couple of weeks, I guess. Okay, let's see. Write that down. And I walked out of there kind of stunned, but I asked her. She said yes. He was best man at the wedding.
That's amazing.
So he's like, don't. Uh, Life is short, my friend. Be decisive. Don't. One time someone watched a video of his about commitment,
Yeah.
and she said, "How do I love your video on commitment? How do I know what to commit to?" And his answer was one word: choose.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, well, you got to see what you're in alignment with, and then you got to figure out what calls to you, and
Yeah.
and then you choose.
Wow. Thanks, Steve, for being so open and so far. And I just had a few more questions. I wanted to. Would you be open to singing a song? I'm just curious. I know you have your guitar there with you.
Very short one, okay?
Okay. I love it.
I don't care if it rains or freezes, long as I got my plastic Jesus up there on the dashboard of my car. I'm going 90 and it's not scary, long as I've got the Virgin Mary telling me I will travel far.
That's amazing. Do you write that?
No, no, that was in the movie Cool Hand Luke.
Wow. I like that. Um,
Gorgeous, gorgeous, beautiful song from the heart.
yeah, I like it. So what would you like your children and grandchildren to remember about you?
Nothing. No, really, I don't want to be remembered. Because I figured that out. I used to take courses where write your own obituary and how do you want to be remembered. I don't want to be. Why do I want people to have this stuff clogging up their memory when their mind could be free?
I love it.
Why would I have such an ego that it wants to keep impressing people after it's dead?
Yeah.
I don't want to stop being impressive just because I've died. I want everyone to remember me a certain way. So I really don't, I don't care. I hope they have an open mind, free. And if memories occur, I hope they'll remember the joy, the fun, the kindness, the happiness we all had together. And he gave it his best shot. He parenting did not come easy to him, and he gave it his best shot. Something like that would be more than enough.
That's right. I love that. That's amazing. Any last comments that you want to say? There's anything that you didn't get to say or express that you want to express?
No. Just thank you, George. I appreciate you taking the time, being interested. I'm very flattered by that.
So one of the things I've instituted in this podcast is I was a big fan of James Lipton. Used to watch him every Sunday inside the Actors Studio. And so I just thought it'd be really cool to use his questions for all my guests. So the last thing I want to do is I want to go through the 10 James Lipton questions if you're game. All right.
Yeah.
So you ready?
I really liked him too.
Yeah, he was amazing. Have you ever done this? You ever done this?
No.
Okay, cool. All right. First question. What's your favorite word?
Obsequious.
What's your least favorite word?
Narcissist.
What turns you on?
Two things, Kathy and music.
What turns you off?
Labeling.
What sound or noise do you love?
Harpsichord.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Sound of a car crashing into something.
What is your favorite curse word?
Criminally. My journalism teacher used to swear by using that. I never knew what it meant. Criminally, can't we get this paper out on time?
That's amazing. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Singing. Crooning.
Just picturing you crooning. That's great. What profession would you not like to do?
Veterinarian.
And the last one here, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
There are a lot of wonderful people waiting to see you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Steve. You're amazing. And it's just been an honor having you on here as my first guest. Have a good one. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much. Take care.